Hi and good evening. It's 6 p.m. on March 13th, 2012. This meeting of Yountville Zoning and Design Review Board is called to order. I will note that all members are present. I will ask for unanimous consent to approve the agenda with item 8.2 continued to April 10th. There's no objection. Bettina, I'm sure everybody here tonight's for you, so we can skip over public comment. There's no consent agenda, no presentation and discussion, so we will proceed directly. No, I skipped over approval of minutes from February 14th. Are there any corrections?
No.
We will have a roll call vote for approval of these minutes since two members were absent. So is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Okay.
Vice Chair Anglin.
Yes.
Member Wonderford.
Approve.
Member Durham.
Yes.
Mr. Yates.
Yes, although I wasn't here.
No. And Mr. Janes.
I'm abstaining as I wasn't present. Okay, now we're back on track. 8.1. Pray go ahead, Sandra.
Good evening. Tonight you have before you design review for addition and remodel of the property at the corner of Yount Street and Adams Street. And it's a little under a 6,100 square foot parcel, and the front orientation of the residence is toward Yount Street. But Adams is technically considered the front yard based on the Yountville Municipal Code that defines the front yard of a corner lot as the yard adjacent to the shorter street frontage. And lot frontage is used to establish setbacks and total allowable FAR exemptions for porches, so it's important in that regard. The existing residence is a 1,449 square foot structure, and it has an FAR of 23%. So there is available FAR to increase the habitable space on the residence, but the FAR for all structures on the property, including the shed and the unenclosed porches, reaches an FAR of just over 26%, and that's based on a limited 250 square foot exemption for the porches based on the Adams Street frontage. And this illustrates that the existing porches are non-conforming as to FAR. That's shown here in this slide. Proposed is an addition on the north side of the residence. It would be a 55 square foot addition, and the applicant also proposes raising the 91.5 square foot porch on the east elevation and replacing it with a new 111 square foot screened porch. The porch would be extended about 2.5 feet to the north to align with the new limits of the new addition. And the addition is designed to match the existing materials and colors, and it generally complies with the zoning and design ordinance standards. One of the issues with the addition is the FAR. And the 55 square foot addition to the residence brings the FAR for all enclosed spaces to 25%, which is the allowable amount. But since the existing porches are non-conforming as to FAR, it increases the FAR slightly. And it is increased to just over 27%. However, if Yount Street had been used to calculate the FAR exemption for porches, a 400 square foot exemption would be allowed, and the FAR would be at 25%, and this fully complies with the code. And we're talking about a residence in Old Town that was probably constructed with Yount Street as the front orientation and front yard of the residence, and it's just later the code that was enacted that would disadvantage the property in this way. So we're talking about less than 20 square feet for the front porch, and staff considers this de minimis, and we support both the addition and the reconfiguration of the porch because it is consistent with the design ordinance requirements for the Old Town Historic District that recognize the importance of the front porch and the impact of that on the street frontage, and this porch is visible from Yount Street. It's one of the real limited areas of the house that is visible. And the porch extension frames the centrally located French doors on the extension, and this brings symmetry and balance to the elevation, and we believe this is a superior design result. And that's preferable to leaving the porch as it is, which would seem awkward with the new addition. Another item for your consideration are the windows and doors, and the staff report notes how the existing windows and doors are wood-framed and they're painted white, while the proposed windows would be steel-framed and painted dark bronze. And staff feels that this different treatment of frames is not in keeping with the design ordinance standards for the consistent use of materials and colors. So we've included a condition of approval that they be painted the same color, whether they be white or bronze. The other items noted in the staff report are parking and landscape screening. And as to parking, the site is nonconforming as to parking. It doesn't have one enclosed and one screened space. But we're talking about a very small addition to an existing bedroom that won't increase the parking demand. And this generally doesn't trigger conformance with the parking standard as say, a new bedroom or a redevelopment of the site would. The landscape hedge on the south side of the property was recently replaced by the applicant. And this is a 6-foot or taller hedge that doesn't meet the 3-foot height limit for within 35 feet of the corner of the intersection. But staff notes that the applicant replaced an existing hedge that was dying with a similar hedge of similar height and similar density, and it achieves the same purpose as for other screening. But staff does note that when you remove a nonconforming structure, it's usually required to comply with town standards, and I raise that for your discussion. We are recommending approval, like I said, with the conditions that are included in the staff report, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions for Bob or Sandra?
I have one. Do you know when the French doors were added on the elevation, whichever one that is?
These,
On the east elevation, maybe?
Oh, no, I would turn to the applicant to answer that. You mean the south set of French doors?
At the bottom of the page, yes.
Yeah.
We'll call on you in a minute. Thanks.
You said, sorry, Rob.
That's it. No, that's my only question.
You said the new porch is not screened. I thought you said screened, but it doesn't look like it. It's just a railing, correct?
No, the proposed
New porch. Yeah.
would be screened. So you can't see that screen material in this
Okay.
elevation.
No, that's fine. All right.
And so the landscape hedge is non-conforming as well? is what you're
Correct.
saying? But
As
there's
to height, and I know that the one existing hedge on Yount Street hasn't been touched. That's generally allowed to remain in place.
Right.
But I have noticed recently that the other hedge was replaced, and that generally would trigger the requirement to comply with the code.
So that's under consideration tonight?
That's noted for your
Or it's just
consideration.
the
That's noted for your consideration if you'd
Okay.
like to take action on that.
And the difference, I'm sorry, I apologize. The difference is 3 feet, correct? From 6 to 3?
I believe it's probably over 6 feet, so
Okay.
it might be an even
Okay,
greater
but it's
difference.
to be 3 feet, correct?
And then if we go back and look at the site plan, you can see how that portion of the yard is the largest portion of the yard and may function more as a backyard where they would want privacy, but it technically is a front yard, and that is a corner intersection where those rules apply.
Or it could be a side yard. Or the...
officially, it is a side yard.
Well, but it's a corner lot.
It's a
Correct.
corner lot
So it has
that's
to be
considered a
set back.
side yard on Yount Street, but the rule is that for 35 feet from the corner intersection, landscape screening, which this is considered, should be limited to a height of 3 feet.
On both streets.
Any other questions of staff?
One more question. Okay. So you couldn't even consider it as a side yard because it's on the corner? Because if it was a side yard, you could have a 6-foot fence there.
Not on a corner for 35 feet from the
No, I got it.
intersection.
No, I understand that.
And we're not talking about the segment that's in Yount Street. The only segment that was replaced was on Adams Street. But what was replaced is similar in size, scale, density
Right.
as to what was there before. There's really no difference.
Okay.
It was just simply replaced.
No further questions to staff? I have none. Hi, we'd like to hear from you, Yao.
I'm Tom Trainer, Trainer Builders, and we're the
Hey.
design builder. So it is a very modest project. My client is just wanting to remodel her master bedroom area. So it's a slightly larger bedroom with a slightly larger bathroom and a slightly larger screened-in porch. I think we tempted through numerous ways of going about it to try to make this addition
Thank you.
comply with all of the codes and regulations for the Old Town area. I think my client bought the property in 97 or 98, and I believe the hedge was replaced around that time, so I don't think it was that recent. It's 14 or 15 years old. And as I think staff had mentioned, that the hedge that was dying, the new hedge is actually less high than the original hedge that they replaced. My client's a single woman. I think she uses this hedge, gives her a sense of security, sense of privacy, and I think most single women would probably understand that that's something that they wouldn't want to lose. Other than that, I mean, there really isn't much that we have to talk about. We brought a sample of the steel sash windows. We've used these in numerous residential projects. If we paint all the windows the same color, I don't believe that the difference in material will be noticeable to the public going by. I mean, they're going to have similar configuration for mullion spacing and things like that. So I don't believe that that they're going to stand out as something different in the overall look of the house.
Thanks. Any questions of Mr. Trainer?
Sorry, you go.
Hi.
And those are actually going to be screened, right? I mean, there's going to be screening around the porch in front
Well,
of those.
well, there's one in the bathroom that won't be screened.
Oh, on the side.
But the French doors will be screened, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, the majority of the fenestration is all going to be hard to determine what it is from the street.
So, correct me if I'm wrong, but I heard you say that all the windows will be painted the same color. So,
No, that's
will they
what-
now be white instead of the bronze color? Or-
Well, we haven't determined that. I think staff's recommendation was that they could either be all bronze or all white, and so I think that's a matter of discussion as to what the final color scheme would be, which obviously we would present during the building permit process.
Sure.
So I think if there was a condition of approval that they were all the same color, that would be, that's what we would do.
So you're open to that?
I think we're very open to that, yeah.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Okay? Any other questions?
I have two. Do you have any idea when the home was originally built?
Don't know. I would say probably 100 years ago, 90 years ago. I haven't really looked at it that closely.
Did you see it on your bus trip?
And second question, echoing Mr. Anglin, neither you nor the applicant have any objection to the condition proposed by staff that the twin windows be treated uniformly, correct?
Well, I don't, and I don't believe my client does either.
Okay. Bettina, will you answer that question, please? What was the question? And I'm sorry, even though I can hear you, you have to talk to the mic. Do you have any objection to staff's proposed condition that the windows all be treated uniformly?
No, that's fine.
Okay. I don't have any further questions, so I think we'll discuss it amongst ourselves. Thanks.
And I
I'd like to begin.
apologize. I should have done it at the beginning, but I always forget I do live within the 500 feet. In fact, I live within about 50 feet. But because I have no interest in real property, I don't have to recuse myself.
Thank you, Mr. Winterberg. Anyone?
I can start if you want to start discussion then. I'll just jump in there. Or do
You
you
know what,
want?
I'm going to set my own invitation and ask staff to give us a little bit of additional information that I think is really useful. If we can look at the site plan for a second. The new site plan. Great. The setback from the proposed addition to Yount Street is 18 feet 7 inches, right? It's really hard for me to see.
Give me just a minute to confirm that.
A2.
Your eyes must be better than mine.
16 feet 7 inches, isn't it?
16 feet. Oh, I couldn't read it. Thank you,
It's
Rob.
over there.
18.
There you go.
And is it not the big one? Is it not also true, Sandra, that the setback to Adams, not shown here, is 16 and a half feet?
Correct.
So in other words, the setback to Yount Street is greater than the setback to Adams
Correct.
by a little over 2 feet. And then secondly, you'd calculated some FAR information that I'd like all of us to have a look at. I think that's going to be the fundamental question.
This is existing FAR, and it shows the different totals for all structures based on the different porch exemptions, if we're dealing with Adams or Yount.
So in essence, what we see is that with Adams as the front yard, it's over, and then with the addition, it goes up to about 11.4% over.
Shown here.
Why does it say exemption?
It would just be,
That's proposed.
it's proposed FAR for the Adams frontage and given the 250
Oh,
square foot porch exemption.
I'm sorry, you changed slides, and I
I did.
didn't realize.
Sorry.
You're too quick. And then we see, if we toggle back, if Yount Street is the front, already well under, and then it's something exceedingly small proposed on the
Correct.
next slide. Okay. So would anyone like further discussion, or shall I keep rolling along?
Go for it.
I don't think any fault can be found with the design at all. None whatsoever. It's consistent. I asked about the age of the structure because I have no doubt that house has been here as long as I can remember, and I grew up here, that house was built with an orientation toward Yount Street as its front yard well before 1989, when the ordinance said make the short leg of a corner lot the front yard. In addition, I would note that the applicant would pick up an additional 20 feet of effective FAR if our ordinance were internally consistent with the building code, wherein 120 square feet of accessory structure doesn't require a building permit, and we exempt 100 square feet. Also, when I talked about the setbacks, I think we see that the effective front yard has the larger setback. So indeed, if Yount Street were the front yard, it's less non-conforming than Adams is non-conforming. By which I mean, if you were building today, you'd have to have a 20-foot setback in the front yard. Your front yard,
15 foot.
15, excuse me, thank you. The greater setback is what you're using as the front yard already. So what I'm driving at is we're being led by the nose by the ordinance, which says make Adams be the front yard. If we can find a way, in my view, to craft an approval that designates for this property only, which predates the ordinance, that the front yard in practice and in form and function is in fact on Yount Street, then I think we're left with a really easy question. I think the question is really hard if we insist on a fidelity to Adams Street as the front yard. So those are my comments.
In terms of the porch addition,
The FAR, I think.
Just in terms of FAR, if Adams is the front yard, it's over on FAR. If Yount, it's essentially exactly what's allowed.
okay, and
So I would say since it precedes the 1989 ordinance, it's non-conforming, and and so that would designate the front yard. And that's what you're saying.
That's what I'm saying.
Nope.
I'm trying to get us to knowing, or suggest that if we take that decision, we do it knowingly.
Legal and non-conforming.
it's
I'd like to offer a couple of bits of information for your consideration. And one of them is that if porches are an exemption to FAR, as are accessory buildings, but accessory buildings, garages, other types of exemptions to FAR are enclosed buildings, where porches are not. They're open. They may be screened, and that's recognized in the definition, but they're essentially unenclosed components. And they're an exemption to FAR that does not otherwise comply with the residential definition of FAR, which reads that it's the sum of gross areas of floors or stories of a building or buildings measured from the exterior faces of exterior walls or from the center lines of party walls separating such buildings.
Do I understand you to suggest that there's no reason to exempt a porch from FAR because it shouldn't be counted in the first place?
Well, that's one point, and we're actually going to be coming forward with a distinction between porches to where they're not mixed in with FAR
understand.
for a future amendment to the ordinance. And so they're not walled components, and FAR is a control in one sense of the mass and bulk of the building on the site, and I would offer that porches actually reduce the mass and bulk of the building by reducing the height and to a first-story level rather than a wall presented at the street that presents all the bulk and you would normally have with a wall structure.
So,
Additionally, I would point out that in Old Town design standards and the design ordinance, under porches, they talk about a covered porch shall be a dominant design feature of the front elevation. Now granted, back in its day, it was the front, but by definition, it gets turned around to Adams. The porch sets a tone for the house as well as the neighborhood, and this is the line I wanted to highlight. Large porches are strongly encouraged. Okay, last point I want to make is that if you had, every house in Old Town gets guaranteed 250 square feet of porch no matter what, as an exemption from FAR. We would not credit, if someone only built a 100 square foot porch, we would not take the other 150 and credit it to be incorporated into the enclosed portion of the house. It doesn't work that way. It's an exemption to FAR. So what I'm getting at is, for all of those factors, yes, the porch is non-conforming. It was probably originally designed with Yount being the front and strongly encouraged as a large porch. And we have this definition problem now, but I would remind the board that they're a discretionary board, and it's in your discretion that we don't end up with these. We have all kinds of different unique situations in Old Town in particular that result in use of your discretion and exercise to produce the best design outcome possible.
I think you've given us some great points, Bob, and I thank you for them. I'm sure we'll continue the discussion. And to the applicant, I'm sure this sounds like a lot of hair splitting. So, but for context, FAR is the single kind of most important guideline we're asked to follow. And so the question of whether it is 25% FAR or nearly 27 is a pretty fundamental one. So how we get to deciding that is important. Even though what's for clearly a pretty simple project and small, it may seem like a long slide to get there. So I hope that gives you some context at least to, I think, my thinking and some of the points Bob's trying to elucidate. So anyone else?
I want to say that, Bob, I agree with you on a lot, but when you start talking about massing, you start talking about an enclosed porch, it actually does increase the massing. So if we're going to start splitting hairs like that, an enclosed porch should be considered differently than a not enclosed porch. Because I agree with the unenclosed porch. Basically, you're just putting something down on the ground. But when it becomes an enclosed porch, I think then you do start talking about the massing of the building.
Well, to that I would,
think a screened-in porch counts as an enclosed.
I'm saying
It's
I-
got to be heated primarily to be considered.
But
as
what I'm
part
just
of
talking about
the
is
farm.
massing. I'm not talking about necessarily what our, but if we're starting to delineate and change that policy, what I'm saying though is if we're talking about massing, something that's screened in, functionally you're increasing the massing of the building because it's not something that, when you look at these screens, you don't see straight through them. They're
A screened
Shaded.
porch, though, is specifically not considered an enclosed porch. The definition calls that out explicitly.
yeah, the
I'm
definition
saying
of
it-
porch means a covered open area that may be screened but not enclosed or incorporated into the building.
So I'm just talking to your argument that porches don't increase massing, and I'm saying they don't normally unless they're screened, and then they do increase massing. So we either have to differentiate between screened porches and non-screened porches, which we haven't done so far, or we have to include all porches in the FAR, from my opinion.
I think we discriminate or differentiate between enclosed and unenclosed, and screened is merely a subset of unenclosed.
But it still increases the massing of the building.
I'm not speaking to massing, but how we define a porch is enclosed or unenclosed, and screening is a subset of unenclosed. I won't make a comment for or against massing.
Well, I'll go out on, I actually really like how Chair Janes put it. And I think if you look at it that way, I never even thought of this house ever facing Adams Street. It doesn't look like it faces Adams Street. Adams is obviously the side yard. I really think that when it was built, it was obviously situated towards Yount, and I think our subsequent adding in of the ordinance that you'd flip it the other way and the other side would be considered, I disagree with yours, that I think if you consider the Yount side the front and you take the 400 square foot exemption, then the FAR goes down to basically acceptable 0.253. And I like that. My big concern is when we've been really fairly strict about people who make changes on non-conforming structures. And our general concept has been, as soon as you make a change, it has to then become a conforming structure. And how do we reconcile that? That'd be a question to the board. I mean, how do we just exempt that this one we don't have to make conforming?
I think the only thing non-conforming about this property is its orientation. Otherwise, it meets the setbacks, well, except for the rear setback. But there are no changes being requested to that rear yard, so there's no increase in the nonconformity.
I think that's my answer, that what has changed is the code changed underneath the house. The house has been here with its front yard toward Yount Street. I guess my perspective is the penalty would really outweigh the crime. The penalty would be change the orientation of the house to meet Adams, because 26 years ago we defined that as the front yard throughout town, not on a case-by-case basis. If we take a look at the old post office with 0 lot lines, we would allow that building to be remodeled because it's retained use. It was there before the zoning came through. But when the zoning ordinance was adopted in '89, I don't think there was a lot-by-lot inventory of the houses in Old Town to see what complied and what didn't.
But fundamentally, we wouldn't have to say that they'd have to move the doors and completely change it, but the consideration of what would be the front facing would have to change.
Well, what would happen is it would go from essentially perfectly compliant with FAR, 0.2538, to 2785. That would be
Significant.
significant. Anyone else?
Just because it's non-conforming doesn't mean it's not illegal, either now or with a change. It's illegal but non-conforming use of the parcel. It would still remain to be illegal use, it's just not in compliance, so they're not really doing anything different. It's still as it was, slightly different statistics.
Well, you really can't expand the nonconformity. You can deal with the nonconforming envelope, and anything you do within that is okay, but you can't expand the nonconformity. I'm just trying to get I'm sorry that this is just kind of minutia, but in terms of the decks, essentially, kick it over, if you consider the Adams Street side, the front yard.
Correct.
Now, how high are these decks off the ground? The south-facing deck, it's pretty low to the ground, isn't it? It's not 18
The
inches.
stairs, too. It's-
But it's not 18 inches.
Two risers.
Isn't 18 inches the kind of,
30.
it's 30 inches is the,
30 is, you need a rail after that, and
right.
under 30, it's not considered.
And it's unenclosed, it's just a deck. It's not a porch.
Yeah, it's a porch. It's covered is why it's included in FAR. If it was just a porch or, I'm sorry, if it was a patio or a deck, it wouldn't be included. It's because it's,
But
Some sort
no,
of
the
covering
south one is not covered. Only the east
the south
porch.
elevation is the right upper one there, and you can see that the porch comes out. In fact, there are
I thought that was-
photos
I thought that
in
was
your
Well,
packet.
the porch does come out, but it's not covered. When I look at the site plan, the south porch is not covered, as the east porch off of the French doors, the series of French doors there, is not covered. The only covered porch is the,
They're both covered. It's,
Can you see this right here,
right
this
here,
roof
that
line?
part in the
Oh, I have-
foreground, and then the one beyond. They're both covered.
I have a hard time reading these drawings,
Said the architect.
said the architect.
This, here, let me,
And the photographs, I couldn't see a thing
Can
of
we
that.
simply stipulate they're covered?
Yes.
That's good, okay, they're
That
covered.
wall, the face of that wall?
yeah, I think this is the wall with the French doors,
Right,
and this porch extends all the way out over here, so that's the porch we're looking at. And this section we see behind is the bedroom behind.
And then it has that porch.
We're
off of it.
stipulating they're all covered.
They're all covered, yes. Answer is they're all covered. And that's why we're talking about them.
so that porch is just floating without columns. Oh,
No, it's got
no, I see it,
columns.
I see it when I look at that. When I look at the plan, there's not anything that delineates it. Okay.
Kind of match up with the French doors.
Yeah, they sort of do.
Yeah, I can see that there's something that looks like columns between the French doors on that side. Anyway, as I said, I have a hard time reading these drawings. Okay. Well, I agree with Chairman James, is that the house predates the zoning, and so I would consider Yon Street the front yard, in which case then it is within the FAR. And maybe it is a good idea to craft verbiage that says, in this particular instance, the house predates the zoning, and so then we could consider Yon Street as the front yard,
As a finding,
as a finding,
okay?
yeah. Therefore, it's project-specific, and it doesn't set any precedent for anything in the future.
Well, let's find one of these findings to stick that sentence in.
And then the only other thing,
Go ahead.
and I do think that there should be, I mean, there's a lot of different kind of opening types in this house, but I think the thing that does hold it together when I drove by it is the consistency in the trim. And so I would recommend that the trim be all the same color around the new French door, the steel doors, and that the sash inside of that trim either be the dark color or the light color. But I'm fine with the rest of it. And one last thing, and as far as the hedge is concerned, I wouldn't consider that, given the age of it, and it's an existing condition in my mind.
What about the new hedge?
Well, the new hedge is an old hedge. You know, if in fact it's 1998,
Let me
that's
suggest
14 years.
an avenue of approach for the hedge.
Okay.
I don't think the time's right to discuss the hedge.
Agreed.
There's nothing in this application that has to do with landscaping. And there is a process to deal with non-conforming fences or landscape screens. We're a little farther down the stream before we would start talking about them. And we don't really have anything in front of us to discuss. So I think the time's not ripe to discuss the hedge. If staff wishes to bring it back at a later time, I'll leave that to their discretion. But I think we're jumping ahead of the process to discuss it tonight in absence of a landscape application. I will neither approve nor deny the height of the existing hedge. I think the time's not right. We don't have sufficient information in front of us, and I think there's an administrative process to play out before we get involved in that discussion.
Okay.
I think it, in the future, does need to be considered, because it's just the same as our gentleman whose back fence he wanted to change. And we had to go through that process and make him tear it down and do it again.
Well, yeah, but I think, if you went through the town and looked for non-conforming landscaping that's 14 years old.
It's not 14 years old. It's about 6 months old.
And,
Yeah.
Mr. Winterberg, you make my point for me. In the case of the fence, we were brought forward with a code enforcement action over a non-conforming fence, and we were specifically asked to make findings about it and hear testimony on that subject with evidence related to that fence. I don't see any of that in front of us tonight, hence, it's not right.
Yeah, no, I totally agree that it shouldn't have anything to do with
I
this
agree, too.
currently.
And also, that was based on a complaint. The non-conforming 8-foot fence was based on a complaint.
So do we have a consensus? We're not going to talk about the hedge any further?
Absolutely.
Not that it's not a worthwhile
I would love to
discussion.
talk about the
but at the
hedge.
time.
I'm
So,
done.
would
I'm not going to talk
anyone-
about the hedge anymore. Okay.
Would anyone care to craft a motion, or shall I put one forward? Mr. Durham, do you have anything to add? Am I skipping over Mr. Gates?
Please, Mr. Chairman.
So I don't know that we need to make a specific set of findings. This isn't a variance request. So my motion would be the ZDRB, in recognition of the fact that the home predates the adoption of the design ordinance, and that for all practical purposes, Yount Street has been and will remain the front yard, approves the project as presented, noting the applicant did not object to condition number 4, uniform treatment of the windows as recommended by staff. Is there,
I second the motion.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Nay. There's no one. 5, thanks very much for your patience.
Thank you.
Carry on.
Thank you.
Okay.
That's just in case you wanted to talk about that.
No fun. Okay, staff and board reports. We are, for a number of reasons, overdue on playing musical chairs.
I think it was your February 14th date, but go on.
And you know what? I don't regret that choice at all.
Yeah.
It was a very. I think I ran into somebody. Didn't I run into you?
Not on Valentine's Day.
Okay, that was another. Same place. Though. In any event, so I think it's great when there's turnover in organizations like this. Never. At this point, I will say, subject to the will of the board, we've got 2 more meetings before we potentially have new members. So a procedural question, can we change our protocols, or can only the council? That is to say, can we change when we elect chair and vice chair, or can only the council do that by
Well,
kind of?
we sort of have it on our task list to bring modifications to your bylaws before you, at which point we bring this election time to coincide with your terms rather than September. So we're not there yet, and I don't know.
But we
just
can change
it
our
like
own
this?
bylaws, correct?
Yeah.
I wasn't sure if it had to go up be run up the flagpole. So, up to you guys. We can hang on for 2 more months, and then I think Rob Winterberg and I, our seats are up, and so that any new members have a chance to weigh in, or we can do it right now. Up to you guys.
No, I
Still
think
would-
it's
I'm fine with 2
appropriate to wait a
months.
couple
I
of
think 2
months.
months is fine.
Yeah.
Yep.
No,
So works for you guys, Bob? So then.
so the question is, do you have to remove yourself from the committee, or you can be
No.
reappointed.
No, you can be.
Yeah, you
But I
can
think there shouldn't be an
apply.
inertia behind it.
There's
I
no-
kind of like what the Board of Supervisors does, which is it's automatic. Personally, I think that's nice. It's
Term
automatic.
limits.
No, it's automatic. It
You
just
rotate.
rotates every year.
Who the chair is.
Oh, the
and vice
chair, not the committee members.
Right, right.
Right.
But in this case, so I think what we're saying is the first meeting in July, there could be a new membership, and then those people, if that occurs, have a chance to weigh in, rather than, oh, here you are, every 3 years, it could be 3 new people being presented with the officer position, which to me doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And we missed last September. That's what kind of brought us all about.
No, I think it makes sense.
Okay, good. I will remind you all that Michelle frightens me. She's really nice, but she frightens me, so don't forget to be in here a week from Friday or sooner
Oh,
with your
the,
reporting stuff.
Oh,
my
the
God.
700s.
The
Sweet as
700.
she is, she will hunt you down.
she will, I know, she has done it
Is that the
before.
Form 700?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do we just mail it in?
Oh, yes, but make sure you mail it in.
Yeah. Well, or bring it
Come
by.
by at 4:55.
Yeah, she will hunt you down.
That's all I've got.
That's good.
Anybody else? You guys?
Well, the Heston project is going back before the town council next Tuesday, so we may have approval of a master development plan.
Have there been changes? Big changes or little changes?
Little changes,
Responsive changes.
but responsive. The building is set back 5 feet from the north property line for the first story, which is about 11 and a half feet, and then it steps back to 10 and a half feet, up to about 22 feet. And the third story element and a lot of the mass with the mechanical room has either been shifted or moved to the central location, and we're recommending that occur, since they're presenting 2 different options. And so we do feel it was responsive to the concerns.
Cool.
Have them do a shade and shadow study.
And there's a more detailed shadow study that accompanies this
They
application.
really did do it.
For the month of December, they did it every hour for 5 hours through the day, so you could see how it
Good.
moved. The other months where it wasn't a big deal, they didn't do that.
Well, that's when your sun angles.
Right. And the market sign on the Chichio building, the request is going before the council on the 20th as well.
Not the market. Their
Correct.
own, their signage for them.
No, to remove the market
No,
sign.
to
So the
remove
one
it.
that came before you is now going before them for a
Oh,
decision.
but they repainted it.
Right,
It looks great.
They've left it, they're happy to leave it, they simply want a decision as to whether they could remove it at some point. They don't seem to be real serious about it, and obviously they've
They just-
repainted, so.
yeah.
I will say, I
More
thought you guys
academic.
nailed that one.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Did you watch on TV?
Yes. Not in
Yeah,
real time.
I was going to
heard-
say.
Not in real, although that might be a great way to participate.
Yeah,
Can I
that's
just-
right. Skype.
Can
You
we,
can
yes,
Skype.
yes. Can we just put laptops up here?
We do it from the comfort of our own home.
That'd be great.
As long as you don't email each other and
talking
do a Brown violation.
No, I mean, during the meet, instead of actually being here, just.
Oh.
Just talking heads, and just like be a
Think about
computer
that. You
screen.
wouldn't- all you'd have to wear is a decent shirt.
Yes.
I'm uncomfortable.
You could be at Hurley's.
So
Put 5 monitors up there.
is that an appeal of our decision, or do we not make a decision? We
This
just
was a
Your comments are
recommendation to the
recommended.
We just
council.
made recommendations, because we couldn't, we just,
because it wasn't a sign thing.
It was a use permit amendment because it was included as a condition of approval.
And design of a commercial building,
Gotcha.
design review.
well, I think it turned out well.
Okay.
It's cute.
Yeah, the red was. Whoa, it's red all the time.
Yeah, I think it's great. I like that.
And then, Mr. Anglin, we're dealing with the code enforcement issue behind the Vintage Inn, and I don't know whether you've been back there to see it cleaned up, and they're going to be building a fence.
Yay. Good, thank you. Thank you for pursuing that.
Remind what is the path not being open?
I They dump a lot of stuff. That's their corporate yard back there, and it just is really pretty awful. And
It was
so,
more of a dumping area than a storage area, even. It was
yeah,
still
it is a dumping area. They have
unsightly the
stuff
way they
around the
stacked it.
existing trees, like old tiles and things like that, which essentially affects the health of the trees. And there's big piles of sand and things like that. So that's great. That's great.
They've already tidied it up, but they will be storing things there still. They'll be mostly adjacent to the existing fence around the patio, but it will be screened, whatever they have there in the future.
And then they cleaned up the kind of debris under those trees that are on the west side of the path. Because essentially they were affecting the health of those trees by putting overburden on them. Cool.
Speaking of tree health, the tree that's on the property we just talked about, I noticed it does have a tag on it. So is it one of our
Yes, it's in the Heritage Tree Survey.
heritage tree survey?
So
Because when they replaced that hedge, I did not see any arborists around, and I saw two gentlemen with axes cutting at the roots right around the tree to put in the new hedge. So I'm fine as long as the tree remains healthy, but if that leads to the death of that tree, the applicant was directly responsible for it. So, just so that we know that.
Perhaps staff could informally encourage the property owner to have the mycorrhizal treatment done in the drip zone of that tree. Realize you can't
Too bad we
compel.
didn't mention that as part of this application. We got it right in front of us.
But we talked about not talking about the hedge.
That is exactly the point where we
Good answer,
raise
Rob.
issues on a property. It's like everything is fair game.
Good answer.
So
No, it's not.
it is.
I think there needs to be a nexus. I personally would find it really objectionable if someone said, then let's talk about, well then, you want to add a bathroom addition, move your shed because it has the incorrect setback. Let's talk about
The
everything.
difference
on it.
here is that she did something to the hedge. That's not
Right.
just a shed that's been sitting there, it's in its non-conforming state. There was action on it, and staff had to raise that for your attention. We won't go after her
Proceed-
without a complaint, but the fact that she brought a discretionary
Do you-
item before
do you
you,
need a
it gets
complaint?
cited.
Do you need a complaint?
Well, that's our
I felt like,
our informal
frankly, Sandra, I
policy.
felt like we were being manipulated into saying, is this okay or it's not, but we're not really going to ask you outright. We're just going to mention it and you can discuss it rather than, we know this was incorrect. Here's the procedure. It either needs to be removed, it needs to be cut down, you need to make a set of findings to allow it to exist as non-conforming. You know, just like we've done, whether it was with the fireplace or the fence, there's a panoply of options in front of us, not just we're kind of aware of this and it happened on the property. I found the procedure in that instance to be, as I say, not ripe, inappropriate. That if it's objectionable, cite them or say you need an application because we're aware of it, but not, we don't have pictures of that hedge in front of us. It hasn't been measured. We don't know what the grade is. You know, I think driving by, wait, Yount Street, that hedge is 12 feet tall,
It's up on
but,
the wall.
but there's a wall there. So I feel that one I disagree respectfully with you that to pursue that, A, there needs to be a nexus between the project we're being asked to approve and the rest of the property, and B, that it needs to be a little more formally put. And so hence, I was going to tell you after the meeting, Rob, I agreed with you that it's a worthwhile subject of discussion, but it's how we get there, I think, is
Yeah,
pretty important.
and I was fine because I didn't feel like, my feeling was it didn't directly relate to this either. But so can we? I mean, I don't know what the staff's process is. Then is it
we
only if there's a
receive
complaint?
we'll be forced to deal with it. Otherwise, we
So we don't do any code enforcement unless there's a complaint,
generally on residential properties, yes.
even though we're aware of it.
Interesting. But that's, so I could build a third-story addition on my house, provided
Well,
nobody complains.
Depends on the level of the.
You'd have to get a building permit. or not.
Only if somebody complains.
Yeah.
I mean, I granted, maybe that's an absurd example, a hedge versus a third story. But so that's okay. So if that's,
And oftentimes, we're not aware of what neighbors do or what owners do unless we receive a complaint.
Yeah. I think
And their bamboo is doing just fine. I actually wanted to go steal some of it while they were yanking it out.
It'll be back.
It'll start popping up all over the place.
But a lot of these issues are frequently a matter of interpretation, and we certainly would value the board's interpretation of, she's, in this case claiming she's just replaced bushes that have been there forever. And that's kind of a hard one. We don't know which ones exactly. They all look new to me, but she's saying just Adams. And
Yeah, no. I know. I walk by twice a day. No, it's just the Adams ones.
Okay.
She didn't touch, because on the Adams one, it was all bamboo. It wasn't the same. Now she's replaced it, so it's the same planting.
yeah.
As she just matched what the side was. It was whatever that, I don't know what that is.
We called it podocarpus.
And then bamboo on the Adams side, but she yanked out
Oleander.
all of the
It's
some
oleander
huge
on yon.
bamboo plants, and then put in the same thing as the front.
Oleander. Yeah, I think it's the grade. I don't think it's that tall.
Yeah, it is, because it's, up like this far. Okay, so short of a complaint, we'll just let her have her hedge.
You've got your hedge, I've got my garages in town, so it's good. Then I know what to do.
Jeff, will you send us home?
Yes, I move we adjourn.
Good night, everybody.
Okay.
Thank you.